Right, I'm having a bit of trouble starting the old TRX 300. It has been running a wee bit rough for the last few days because it was actually running better when I put the choke on. I'll see if the carby's getting fuel, and if it is, I'll check the spark, make sure it's sparking, and then take it from there. Pretty simple, these old Honda motors. There's no high-tech computers or anything in there, so it should be pretty straightforward to fix. So I'm going to check if it's getting fuel now. I'll just turn that tap off and open the carburetor drain, so that'll drain any fuel out that's sitting in the carb bowl. If there's any water in there, it'll get that out too. So it does have fuel in the carburetor. Okay, so the carburetor bowl is empty, so I'll turn the fuel back on. And yep, it's getting fuel, so that's not the issue. Tighten that back up. So it's just a process of elimination, really. That doesn't look too watery at all. I don't think it's a fuel to the carburetor problem. So I'll give that a bit of a clean up and then try it for spark. Yep, plenty of spark there. It's getting fuel and spark. Hopefully it's not a timing chain issue, so that could be a bit of a more involved fix. I'll chuck that spark plug back in and try it again. I'll have a look at that carburetor, clean it out, make sure there's no jets blocked. Air filter looks okay. Looks pretty clean in there. Oh well, there was something in the jet. I've blown it out, so that might have been the problem. That valve looks alright. The slow jet looks clear. It's a much smaller hole, so it's harder to see through, but it is clear. The starter jet looks clear, so it must have just been the blockage in the main jet. I'll put it back together and see how it goes. Oh well, that was a pretty easy fix. Just a bit of gunk in the main jet. There shouldn't be anything getting blocked in the jets unless there's a filter problem. So I'll take this tank tap out and just check the filter on it. Sometimes they get a little split in them or something, so I'll check that, and maybe put an inline filter in there too, just to catch any bits that get through the tap filter. If I hadn't been able to find anything wrong with the carburetor, the next thing I would have checked would be the timing chain. the way it backfired. That can sometimes be a timing issue as well. Quite often when the chains get stretched on these, the timing goes out and they start coughing and spluttering a bit, so that would have been the next thing. But I did put a new timing chain in this a couple of years ago, so pretty unlikely that's what it would have been. So I'll take it for a wee spin and make sure it's going to keep going. This is another four-wheeler I bought a few months ago. It wasn't running at the time. Got it for $350. It had no spark and no electricity was getting to the ignition. Tested everything out, coil and plug and leads and all the switches. They were all good, so that pointed to the CDI under there. So I ordered one of those. That was like $50 and it started straight up. But there's normally a reason why the CDIs blow, so we'll get the tester out and see what it's doing when I start the motor. So that's confirmed what I suspected. You could see there when I revved it, the battery was going up to like 16-17 volts and it shouldn't go that high, so that tells us that the rectifier regulator is blowing. So we'll take that off, and I've got another one because I suspected that's what it was. So I'll put that on and see how we go. So these are the DC output leads. Down here we have the input from the generator. 3 yellow AC leads, so that comes off. And out of there. It's just a simple rectifier and regulator built into that sealed box, so they're not anything you can really fix. So they're just like a replacement part. So this is the new one, just a cheap Chinese version, but it should do the job as long as the holes are all, yep, seems about right. Slightly different look about it, but the holes are the same. These bolts are a wee bit rusty, so I'll always like to put a bit of anti-seize on things when I'm putting them back together. I just use like a lanolin based grease, which does a good job, and that just means next time it'll be much easier to take off. These old farm bikes are normally pretty rough because a lot of farmers just don't even bother maintaining them. They just run them till they die and then replace them. I get quite a few of them very cheap around here because farmers just can't be bothered fixing them and it's not worth taking them into the shop, so they just hock them off for a couple of $100. I find the two-wheel drive models are normally in better shape than the four-wheel drive because the four-wheel drive ones just will keep on pulling, so there's a tendency to just pull heavier and heavier loads and you end up breaking things because they're sort of pulling more than they should be, whereas the two-wheel drive ones, they'll just skid, and so it's not so hard on them. I quite often find the four-wheel drive ones are a lot more worn out than the running gear and engine. The problem with that one, it doesn't have the same little hook on it for hooking onto there, so I'll just cable tie that on, I think. Shorter leads as well, damn it. Goes in there. So now when I start it, that should charge the battery to around 14.2 volts, and then it should stop charging. Perfect, so that was a simple fix. It just shows you though what happens when one thing goes. It can lead to a chain reaction of problems. So all that happened originally was the regulator blew, which caused the battery to boil dry, and that caused the system to run over voltage, and that blew the ECU CDI. So you can see how one thing leads to another with these things if you don't catch them early. So if you ever notice that your battery is giving you problems and you notice a funny smell or something, sulfuric acid smell, just check your regulator, and it might be as simple as replacing that. I'll tidy up this wiring a wee bit, and then that one's good to go. So this is another old farm bike I got for $300. This one needed a bit more work. There was electrical issues with it, and also someone had rebuilt the engine and didn't put the retaining clip in the piston pin, so piston pin came out, scored a big gouge in the bore, and it was using just about as much oil as petrol. So I just bought a new jug off eBay for, I think it was $80 or something, and redid the motor, and running sweet after that. But now it's got a problem where you turn it on, try and start it, and just get this click. So that's just the starting solenoid, and how you can tell if that's what it is, you just bypass the two big terminals on the back. It's activating the solenoid, but obviously the contacts are burnt or something. I think I've got one of those spare, so I'll rummage around my spare parts. Most vehicles have the same sort of setup as well, so if you hear that clicking sound when you try and start it, it's usually just the solenoid. So it's just basically a relay that when you push the start button, it energizes the coil and the solenoid, and that's supposed to connect contacts, and that lets current flow to the starter motor. But obviously this one's burned out. You probably could pull that apart and clean the terminals and put it back together, but they can be pretty fiddly, and it's usually just easier to buy another one, or in my case I've got a few spare parts, so I'll just swap it out. This one has a different plug, so I'll just cut that off and put the other plug on. So I want it to stay waterproof. I find heat shrink doesn't really get it very waterproof, so I'm just going to use some silicone sealant, marine sealant, and that should stop any moisture getting in there. Bit messy, but it does the job. Perfect. Cost me nothing because I already had this one, but these solenoids are only, I don't know, might be $20 or something. So another simple fix. So I'll just let that silicone dry off and then tape that together, and it should be good to go. So anyway, that's just a few little fixes I thought I'd show you. Very common sort of things that go wrong with four-wheelers. It saves you a couple of $100 and not having to take it into the shop to get fixed. Thanks for watching. See you next time.